Okay, I think it's working this time.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Yeah,
8.
viewers. Let me see. Let's see.
Yeah, 400 people waiting. That's pretty good.
There. All right, we're live. We're live this time. It worked. Yes.
Good work.
I cannot see the chat, but we are live this time. Hello, everybody.
I can see I have it here.
You got it. Okay, good. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
small technical difficulty, but we are here. Let me make sure. Can everybody hear me and hear Riddy at the moment? Because we haven't done this dual stream through this way before. Hello?
Let me move the chat over here.
Cool. Let me know in the chat that you can hear all of us. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So obviously, for those of you who do not know, Riddy has been around since the beginning and essentially started the Muppetiers podcast a long time ago. How many years? It was like 3-4 years ago now, almost.
When was the podcast? The podcast was probably 3 to 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And
we did that for a bit. And yeah, exactly. Riddy is a different person, as we can see, for the first time ever. Riddy's a different person.
Yeah, unfortunately, when COVID kind of finished and I had to go into the office again, the podcast wasn't feasible. But now that my work schedule is a little bit better and I have a great new job and everything's going really great, it's a little bit more feasible for me to actually do these a little more often. So yeah, hopefully I'll be on here a little bit more once in a while. My opinions suck, so
yeah.
Hopefully not too much.
Not too much more, but a little bit more.
Not too much. Enough
to keep things interesting. So before we start, as usual, we have a new intro, and obviously that is something that everybody always is looking forward to. That everybody is always happy to hear. So
apparently I'm a lot louder than you, by the way.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm gonna wait, what? James louder, Riddy quieter. All right, hold on. Let me move. I'm gonna move his down a little bit on my end, and then
adjust the gain on my mic.
And then I'm gonna move my mic. Hold on, a little bit closer to me. So let's do that.
I agree, Matthew. Rangers in 6.
All right, cool. That should help. That should help on the audio level. So, all right, here we go. We're gonna do this this intro, and for those of you who remember the original podcast, I think you're definitely going to enjoy this a lot.
We've decoded the intel from the First Order spy, and it confirms the worst. Somehow
Ready.
Returned.
Can Manchester United score? They always score. How's your bottle?
All right, there you go. So, obviously we had some the old podcast. We had that kind of introduction with the original, the audio from '99 and all of that. And yeah, so once again, a big thank you to our man Jevin for putting that together for us once again. And yeah, much appreciated. More of the fun we like to have. Okay, so let's kind of get into it first and foremost here. One of the things that we've always liked to do kind of as a community, and we used to talk about this a lot on our podcast, and we used to talk about it. I think it's kind of an important lesson, is about media literacy. And when you see reports, instead of jumping to briefs, or instead of jumping to guessing, instead of things like that, there's reasons why things come out in the media and how they are covered, and what they actually mean when those things come out, how they're done. And especially when you're talking about, for example, I would say outlets that are very generally professional, the BBC, the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Times. There's a reason you listen to these, because they have certain standards in terms of publishing. And, it's important to just kind of understand that, so you can think with what may have happened. So I know Riddy wanted to talk about some of that.
I think a really great example of this was recently with the Steinberg thing. Obviously, there was the whole controversy about Steinberg coming out and saying we're definitely sacking Ten Hag right before the final, which everyone got up in arms about. There was a lot of debate about did INEOS leak it, etc. But I think in a certain situation like that, you need to look at who is putting out the info. Go back and say, okay, this person historically reported on, for example, Steinberg historically reports on Chelsea, right? He's a tier, I think, 2 for Chelsea, maybe a tier 3.
He's a good journalist for them, yeah.
He's a good journalist, but historically works in London, lives in London. Oh, am I quiet again? I think I might be quiet again, James.
I'll turn it up a little. Yeah, go ahead.
Whole thing. Yeah, so basically, historically, it's a guy who works and lives in London. I think you need to look at, where is Steinberg getting this news from? Because Steinberg obviously has not been a guy that has been given INEOS information. INEOS itself has been very tight-lipped. A lot of United reports, I'm assuming, are not coming from INEOS. INEOS historically is a very tight-lipped organization right now with United, and I think in general. And so you look at the report coming from Steinberg and you say, okay, well, Steinberg's a London guy. He historically has not been an INEOS guy. Like, where is he getting this information from? So you can say, okay, most likely you can look at the fact that we've been talking to other managers, and you can say, okay, well, Steinberg most likely got that from either Chelsea or from a managerial target. I'm too loud now.
Don't get distracted. I'll fix it.
I can't help it. Anyway, so yes, that's just what I wanted to kind of talk about was like, I think when, especially the summer and transfer wise, and something that the Muppeteers as an organization has historically advocated for is looking at a piece of news kind of more objectively and where it's coming from so that you can kind of figure out what is a reliable piece of news. And sometimes it's not just about the journal. It can be about where he's getting it from. So yeah. So I think that's just an intro. Kind of what I wanted to say is that like as we go into both the sacking of the not sacking of the manager, sorry, as we go into the managerial saga, we're gonna talk about the manager in a second. As we go into the managerial saga and then we go into the transfer window, I think it's an important lesson to learn about the reports that are being put out, and not just to say, oh, an aggregator's putting it out, let's believe it right off the bat. Why are you laughing at me?
No, I'm just enjoying I'm enjoying the comments and the distractions that are usually directed at me that I'm now reading at you. It's pretty funny. I love the comments, honestly. It's really funny. So yeah, anyway, what Riddy says there is correct. And part of the thing is that, a lot of this stuff gets kind of, double sourced and verified and all that. And one of the aspects is if you listen to people like The Athletic in terms of talking about that story in particular and Ten Hag's future, they said in the podcast right after that they recorded the night of or the morning after the FA Cup final that they had very strong information about Ten Hag leaving. And I know for a fact that there are quite a few other outlets that do too. However, the people who who report for United have a sort of a different due diligence, which is that they will generally, from BBC, from Athletic, from these places, they will approach the club and ask for comment, right? They'll present something to them and ask for comment. And when they did that, they got essentially sort of the club line. Like they didn't confirm it, they wouldn't answer it. And so a lot of times the people who have relationships with United won't report things unless they get that either the club just sort of no commenting or kind of approving it. And a lot of times, obviously, they're going to want to maintain, if there's something the club really don't want them to say, whether because it's not true or otherwise, that maybe that's not reported. And that's fine. That's a part of managing the relationships in media. Dominic Tannenbaum, finally the real star, joins the show. There you are. And once again, thank you all for anybody who does donate, because I do read the comments, but I'm going to try to not get too distracted and be a little bit money grubbing and say definitely make donations, and I will definitely read your comment versus maybe not answering it. So yeah,
I think
that,
the Steinberg thing.
yeah, go
To
ahead.
be a little conspiratorial, I think the Steinberg thing's interesting because if it did come from a Chelsea side, right? If Chelsea had been talking to McKenna, and they had said, okay, McKenna's like, no, I think we're going to go to United, or they're talking to Poch or whatever. Releasing that info to Steinberg from an organizational perspective right before the final could be like, is Chelsea trying to sabotage United's chance in the final? Because because we won, we did kick them out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
it's stupid.
I'm sure that is not true. Obviously one of the things.
I'm sure it's not. 100% not.
One of the things that happened is that they were already doing these interviews, right? And let's shift it kind of over to the next topic here. Oops. Let's shift it a little bit over to the manager topic. And because it's kind of relevant to this and talking about where we're at now and where everything is at now. The reason this all came out is because Chelsea sacked Pochettino, right? That's what happened. Chelsea sacked Pochettino, and suddenly it was like an explosion. Why? Well, if you look at their list, and it's what I said on some videos last week, their list of managers reflects our list of managers pretty dramatically. McKenna, Pochettino, who was their manager, becomes on our list. Maybe not Tuchel anymore, although they've had some interest in him. Maresca, even, who they're hiring, was of interest to United, though I'm not sure how far that went with them. And then Thomas Frank as well is certainly a name. And then there's there's Roberto De Zerbi as well. So a lot of that was overlapping, and so of course once Chelsea start talking to these people, what do their agents do? So you have to be a little bit careful too. Let me answer all these donations and then I'll finish my train of thought here. Dominic Tannenbaum again says, but I'm also on Discord, so F you, ready, okay. Thomas Cherry says, is Poch, Frank, Tuchel an upgrade? I don't think so. We can talk about that opinion in a minute. Ranveer Singh says, love the work done by you guys, true journalism. Thank you very much. So where it gets messy with this is that, of course, the agents of these managers, when Chelsea's approaching them, they're going to want to say, we have other interests. United are talking to us too. Some of it true, some of it not so true, some of it is the same with transfers. The same thing happens, and it's why, they get their names brought into practically everything. If you take the example of Kieran McKenna, right? To me, McKenna made a lot of sense, right? And when you look at the profile of manager, and it was somebody that they'd been kept an eye on. If you based it purely on media stories, you might have gotten the idea that nobody really said that Kieran McKenna was far and away United's top choice. Far and away, right? Except there's not really any evidence of that happening. And so the story gets played up, and what I knew is he didn't want to go to Chelsea, and you look at how it all matches up, and in the end he gets a 4 times his wage new contract. Well, that's the job of agents, is to build those stories, build those interests, and create a market for their manager, for their player, for their client. It happens so much with summer transfer targets. Why wouldn't it happen with managers? So that's not to say he's not.
You don't think McKenna was high on INEOS's list?
I don't think he was the top target for sure. I think there was the short list that kind of came out, but again, this only really came. This wasn't briefed by INEOS. This wasn't briefed by United. This came out on the basis of talking to the contacts that these journalists have, and they're good ones. I'm not saying you should doubt this info, but he was just on the list, right? And I will remind people that David Ornstein, who is probably the best in the business on everything, did say that it wasn't necessarily expected to develop. And he was really careful throughout this process about how he said things, because even if it appears like a lot was happening with it, someone like him, who may be even more connected than you think, might be looking at it and saying, I think he's going to sign a new contract, and I'm going to wait until this comes out, and that it's all kind of being played up for a contract. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. Danny says,
I think it's interesting.
Go ahead, and I'll read these out. I missed like 3 of them.
Oh. Yeah, go ahead.
Danny says, some ask for United DNA. Fergie played counter versus Arsenal, wingers against narrow teams. The only United DNA is United trust in the youth. Eric Ten Hag established Garnacho and Manu. Well, I don't totally disagree with what you're saying. There's not really been a united way to play for a long time. It was interesting. There's an interview with Carlo Ancelotti where he talked about there isn't really one style the way that he views it, which is correct in terms of how Madrid approach things, where you're able to kind of change all the time. And that's a different kind of philosophy to the very systemic way we see it with like Arsenal and City and all of that. Javier Jimenez says BBL jersey, so thank you for that. And cool, yeah. So again, we don't know that McKenna was top of the list at all. There was really nothing to say that was the case, and so one of the things that I want to bring up and mention, because I've said this many times, is INEOS don't tell anybody anything. There's been stuff going on for a long time. All the stuff on looking at managers, on the doubts on the managers, I've been saying for months while it was quiet, while they're planning with Ten Hag and there's nothing else indicated. That's what everybody said, but there were these things happening that people didn't know about. And one of the things that throws, that kind of bothers me a little bit is once it gets quiet and you get a story like this that comes out, and then you get the FA Cup and you get all this kind of like wind blowing in one direction, a lot of people jump on that. And I'm not even necessarily blaming the people who are writing it, but people start saying shit that because they're trying to get ahead of a story or be first on a story or things like that. And you have to kind of logic some of it through, on these things. One, they don't know anything about what INEOS are thinking, and they never have. And saying suddenly that INEOS are thinking this or that, you don't know. Where did that suddenly come from that you know that? Secondly, there's only two INEOS people, Sir Jim and Sir Dave. And Sir Dave's focus has nothing to do with football at the moment. His focus has been on putting together the training ground fixes, the injuries, the fitness, these kind of things to wrap it up. And they're starting that work on Carrington. That's been his focus. He's not picking the manager. He has nothing to do with that aspect of it. What's that?
That's going to be Omar. It's going to be Wilcox. It's going to be It's going to be Ashworth whenever that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Jean-Claude Blanc is there to essentially do things and sign off on things until Omar Barada gets in place as the official CEO. But as we saw from reports that said Barada was already doing things, you could almost say maybe he's just a bit of a figurehead at the moment, which is fair enough. He's going to be involved as a board member, but again, Jean-Claude Blanc historically focuses on the commercial aspect of the club. That's what he does. That's where his expertise is. It's not to say he doesn't have, as it said, he has contacts and he's helped them get in touch with a lot of people. But again, he's not the one making these calls. It's people who are appointed to make these calls. Remember the original interview with Sir Jim Ratcliffe said that you'd appoint this director and a CEO who would decide on a style, and then it goes down, and they are appointing people. Jason Wilcox was hired at the behest of Omar Barada. That's what all of these people reported. And that is correct. Those are the people who are making the decisions. Those are the people who are pushing it. So if you keep going down the line, it's up to Wilcox. It's up to Wilcox and potentially Barada, depending on his involvement or not in things. That's who it's up to.
I think he's involved. I think it's. I think the gardening leave.
Yeah.
But I know. We can't say whatever, but he's definitely involved. And I don't. The trouble is that the decision would be down to Ashworth. Mm-hmm. The problem is obviously we've been in a tussle with Newcastle, so it can't really be down to Ashworth at the moment. Yeah. So I think maybe they're, who knows what's going on with Wilcox, Ashworth, whatever, but I think that it'll be a joint decision between Omar, Ashworth somehow, and Wilcox. But then I think a point I wanted to make was when you look at the managerial targets that we have right now, the reports that did come out, I think, from someone like Ornstein was that they wanted to change up what the manager meant at United. Mm-hmm. And this was a key thing, which is that, we're going to get rid of the manager being super involved in the transfers. Obviously, he'll be involved, but as we've seen with Ten Hag and his whole thing, we have 3 or 4 players that he wanted exclusively, that he needed, and they've just been such a bust. So I think that's obviously a key, is that if you look at the managers and you look at the targets, like Tuchel, while I think is obviously a great manager, that's a manager who's historically wanted to be heavily involved in the targets. And so I think he obviously is probably not likely. Poch is a tough one on that, because if you look at the reports of why he initially left Chelsea, it was because he didn't feel like he had enough control and he wasn't going to be included enough with the new structure, which almost goes against what INEOS and the new structure want. So Poch, I think, is a tough one with that, unless he's willing to be more of a coach than a manager, which I think would be a step back from what he's trying to get. So when you start looking at that, like, for me, is Thomas Frank necessarily the best option for INEOS and the new structure, because he does fit that mold of what we're trying to move towards? It's interesting.
Yeah, it is, and again, it comes down to that it's going to be at the direction of the people who are in place, because even similar to how they've done it with Nice, they made the mistakes of being over involved in the beginning, and they acknowledged that, and then said they're going to step back and start appointing people, and the people they've been getting now are great, and and it's about getting the right football people in. John Sem says, Sir Dave picked his friend Ashworth. No, Ashworth picked Southgate for England. Ashworth has not proven as good, too British-centric. Ashworth is, maybe he knows Sir Dave, because Sir Dave knows practically everybody in England, but that doesn't make him unqualified for that job. Newcastle just grabbed him after doing a takeover, so obviously he's somebody who is in demand.
I also don't think you can just be like, Southgate he appointed Southgate, he's
Southgate's
bad.
done well for England relative to where they were before. Maybe he's not the best, but he has improved England, and at least the overall setup of the English national setup has improved a lot, which was a lot of what Ashworth was involved in.
And I think obviously I'm American, so the English people can talk more about the what Ashworth has done, but reports have shown that Ashworth has done a lot to make a good system in the England FA. He's done a good job, and he's done a good job for more than just Southgate. Since Ashworth has been involved, the English national team has done a lot better in competitions. I think it's completely unfair to say just because he appointed Southgate that he's bad. Anyway, I do want to talk about what Danny said, and this is about the manager.
Yep.
And people were asking about what information you know about the manager, so we can get to that in a second. You're free to respond, everyone. But I think the trophy thing is interesting, right? Because Ollie was very famously quoted as saying that trophies paper over the cracks of a broken system, right? And that's not the direct quote, but basically what Ollie said was, a trophy can cover up very glaring issues, and I think you need to look at this season as a whole. And look, fans are fickle. If you saw what the MEN poll that said that 68% of people wanted to sack Ten Hag after the Crystal Palace game, and then after the FA Cup final, 78% wanted to keep him. We're not getting Southgate. No one. United is not hiring Southgate. Move on from that. Southgate is not going to manage United. Let's not do that. Anyway, if you look at, it's a very fickle situation, because you have fans that are like, oh, we got killed 4 by Castle, sack him, and then the second we win a trophy, they forget about the season-long, almost hell that was many of the games. So I think it's not fair. I think it's not fair to say, oh, we won 2 trophies in 2 seasons, which is great, by the way. Obviously I celebrated like everybody, but it is papering over the cracks of a season-long group of mistakes that Ten Hag continuously made again and again and again. So I don't think it's too
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the question would be, would anybody take 8th in an FA Cup next year as well? And the next year, and the next year. Is that considered a successful season? I don't know. I don't think it is. I think that obviously the aims have to be a lot higher. And of course, part of the issue is you go into the third season, your aim can't be lower than you achieved in your first year, you know? And it's questionable. I don't think that a single game really changes too much overall, or should. The whole body of work obviously goes into it. And the question, if Ten Hag won 2 cups at another Prem club, we'd want him. If it was Leicester, you know, if it was Aston Villa, if it was West Ham, yeah. But it's not. It's Manchester United. So getting 8th is unacceptable, right? That there's a balance of all these things. Hello from Tubby Saber. And then has England improved? Did a great crop arrive? Both. And part of even the proper kind of development of talent came down to some of the setup from Dan Ashworth as well. From Manchester, no United fans read MEN rival stirring. No, I don't think that's accurate. I think it's pretty obvious to most people that prior to the FA Cup, most people would have been more prone to sacking him. At the same time, it doesn't really matter. You know, either way, whatever it is, it's not how you make decisions, right? It's just not how you make decisions. And what we wanted good owners for is to set up football people in place who are competent and to have them carry out the decisions that they want to make, right? That's it. That's what we wanted. That's what we asked for. And that's what we want them to do. It's not there's so many things that have to be done to fix it. Obviously, in terms of the hierarchy, in terms of the fitness, in terms of the training ground, but it's not one thing or another. It's all of them. It's all of them put together that you have to focus on. And then they look at that and will say, okay, well, is the manager somebody who fits within exactly what we want? Is he the best person of the options available for what we want or not? And if he is, then he will stay in the job. And if he isn't, then he won't stay in the job. That's really the simplicity of it, and that's how it's been working since the beginning, really. Quick question, John Sem, can we talk about INEOS having 6 managers in 5 seasons at Nice and finishing 9th and 5th all the time? Does that not concern anyone? I mean, you have to look at obviously their finishes relative to wages and spending. They're finishing about where they should. Admittedly, they said that they made mistakes in the beginning. Farioli and such leaving is not really on them now. They hired a good enough manager, so good that he got poached by Ajax, right? Because he did such a job, as did their director of football get poached because they did a good job. And they've already, put a new one in place who's really well rated. But they have not been sacking managers now in recent times. They appointed people to make those decisions, and that's kind of how it works.
Okay. Do you want to just talk about whether we think he's going to get sacked or not?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like,
the simplicity.
I agree. We've been kind of dancing around the actual issue.
The simplicity of it is that, look, they had a meeting multiple weeks ago, which is where I say I don't totally buy the review aspect of it presently, where everybody was together. It was near the end of the season. Wilcox has been assessing things, and they started interviewing and talking to other managers. I've shared my doubts all along from my information that they had doubts whether he was the right fit for them. It's not just about results. It's about the role that is being on offer, the job, the situation of it, his contract situation, whether you can go into the final year, how convinced you have to be in order to extend a contract or not. There's a lot of those considerations in place. And I know quite strongly that as of last week, they were very likely to let him go. I mean, I would have put it 9 out of 10 that he was gone. I don't have any update on that. There's a lot of people filling the space with things, some of it that is just blatantly not true, and some of it which maybe could be seen to be true, but there's no update. There's no update. If you look at the updates from a lot of people who said that he was a severe risk of being sacked, that he was very likely to go, that he's in danger of it. You had Telegraph still saying he's in grave risk of being sacked despite the FA Cup final. There's no updates. There's the information as of last week, which was, yes, that I 100% will stand by, that he's very likely to leave. Nothing's changed in terms of, I have no new information that anything has changed. You have all these external things one can look at and observe and say and all of that, but there's no information to suggest that yet that anything has changed as to their plans. And I wouldn't write off that information from last week. Schwan Desai donated twice, which thank you. You didn't include any messages with it. If there was something you wanted to say, you could just type it and I'll try to find it. Andre Bogdan, overall financials are an issue. Why doesn't INEOS do anything about the interest costs associated with the 800 million of debt? Because they'd have to pay off 800 million for what? I'm not even sure. You'd have to have an agreement that you'd be getting the, what do you call it, like more ownership for that? But then that means the Glazers aren't getting any money if the money that's being paid to them goes to the debt. So obviously that's not an agreement that either party kind of suited. I
also will say, like, I've spoken about this in terms of corporate financials in the past, but like, first of all, corporate debt, amazing instrument for raising money, etc. And you really don't have to worry about debt payments, about the interest on the debt until the actual interest payments get above a certain amount of your revenue. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, so many companies have large amounts of debt, whether that's in convertibles, it's in debt. Like, it doesn't really matter at this point. Debt is not inherently bad, and I think that's corporate debt's not inherently bad. I think that's something that's been very vilified in our fan base without a real understanding of, corporate finances anyway. I don't really want to talk about Antony, to be completely honest with you.
Tubbs, can we talk about Anty's contribution in the FA Cup win versus Pool? It was a good
dude
goal.
Complained about playing left back. What do you want me to talk about?
It was a good goal.
In the moment. I don't know what to say.
And that's it. We'll move on. Again, guys, look, like, the thing about all of this is you're very welcome to have a different opinion to us. Yeah, I don't think that Ten Hag is the best guy moving forward. I'm sure there's a lot of people who agree with that and a lot of people who don't. Doesn't matter. The information that I'm talking about has nothing to do with that opinion. It's about who do they think is the best guy moving forward or not. That's all. And I'm happy to have people disagree with my opinions entirely. It would be boring if somebody just got on and said I agree all the time. But
for the record, I am not waffling. I still personally, opinion-wise, think that we will sack him.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's still the most likely outcome. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the most likely outcome. I think they will sack him. I think they don't. I think that there's just no way that INEOS is like, okay, let's start talking to managers prior to the FA Cup. But hey, if he wins the FA Cup, let's just, let's just not do it. Like, I don't think that's something INEOS would, and the new structure would do. I think realistically, they planned on sacking him whether they won or not. I think it's a company that's also proved that they don't care about fan sentiment. Like, they did the deal with the Glazers that was wildly unpopular in the fan base, that still left the Glazers so under control. They did that regardless of fan sentiment or not, to get their foot in. So I think they're going to do what they think is best, regardless of what the majority of United fans say or what a poll on MEN or Twitter says. I think they will end up doing that. So I do think that they will end up sacking him. I think we discussed the only way that they weren't going to do that is if they just didn't have a better option. But why would they go through this whole process if they didn't feel like there was one out there?
Yeah, for sure. And moving it to kind of the sort of INEOS discussion in terms of how they operate and things like that. And obviously this ties into the managers. Is that, they've always done things that are unpopular. You look at a lot of the corporate decisions that they're making at the moment. Like, there's two different aspects of their view on relating with fans, right? Which is, one, they want the match-going experience to be good. They want fans to go to a good stadium. They want them to have a good pre-match experience. They want them to have a good post-match experience. They want them to have a good experience watching United. That's the product being put out there. That's not the same as... Should we like create an app like that other guy, the sort of weird bidder, said, to poll fans as to who we should sign on transfers, who we should decide
so
on managers and things like that. That's not the same as having the fans at the heart of everything. It's about things like the stadium. It's about things like the match day experience. It's about all of those aspects. It's about as well how they do their media. You've seen, in my opinion, quite a big shift in the last couple of months in terms of the relationship and the type of content even being put out by United. In the week leading up to the FA Cup, there's like 6 interviews with players and people like that to media, young players and people that were giving them a lot more attention. And those are the things we want to see. And those are the things that I do think make fans pretty happy. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the club having relationships with fan channels and media and news and all of that. It's about where's the line drawn? Where do you draw the line in terms of that relationship? Nothing I say should ever have an effect on a decision that they make. It should have nothing to do with it. And
when you talk about fan ownership, like you look at a club like Bayern and clubs like that in Germany that are owned by the fans, but like the decision still isn't down to the fans. Like when they don't sign a player and they're like, hey, fans, let's vote. Like at the end of the day, it's still up to the people that run the club, despite the fan ownership. And so you're right. Like getting the fans involved is necessary. And at the end of the day, sports are nothing without their fans. But the people that are in charge were put there because they have spent their entire life dedicated to football, studying, learning. You're not going to go to a doctor and then listen to your friend Jeff, who is in accounting. Like, at the end of the day, you want people in charge that have dedicated their life to working in the sport. And so I think they do know better. I think at the end of the day, they do know better, and they're hired because they've been successful in football. So, I think listening to fans is a mistake in the first place because we just don't know better. I don't know better than Dan Ashworth. I don't know better than Omar. Like, I don't know better than these people. Like, I just don't.
Yeah. The question there from Paratosh is, could it be possible they decided on Kieran McKenna, but since he signed a new contract with Ipswich, they've decided to stick with Ten Hag? It's a good question. I don't have any evidence, again, that he was top of the list and that changed it. I don't think there's any information to suggest that. At the same time, that would be pretty bad. For one, they don't seem like the type of people to go into this kind of situation without telling your manager anything with only one option. Second, they don't seem like the type of people to miss. If they wanted McKenna, they would have offered him the job. We've not heard they've offered him the job. Nobody has reported that he's been offered the job. So, I don't think that McKenna would have turned down United in that instance. There's reports he turned down Chelsea. There's none that he turned down United. So obviously it leads me to believe he was never offered the job, and so I don't think it's particularly relevant to the situation. An option maybe, but go ahead.
Why do you think we weren't interested? Do you think that he's a little green? I mean, I know he hasn't technically managed a top flight team yet.
Yeah,
but
I think that's the main reason. I think that's it. I mean, I think that's the main reason. It's just that he doesn't have the experience. That's all. That would be.
Hold on. I wasn't removed. Hold on, Shuban. I wasn't removed from Muppetiers. When COVID finished, I had to go back into the office, which made recording the podcast very difficult. So now that I have a better job now, things are a little more flexible, so I'm able to do this now every once in a while. So yeah, wasn't removed. It was just kind of circumstances. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. You think continue? Yeah,
and obviously they've done interviews per some of these reports since with Thomas Frank, with Thomas Tuchel, with Pochettino. So obviously they have other options. Riddy got called in like Sir Jim, to go back to work. And
what are you gonna do, man?
Yeah, voluntary redundancy otherwise. So that isn't actually voluntary redundancy. All right.
Well, I do want to talk about whether we think. I mean, I just went through this whole spiel about us not knowing more than anyone, but that doesn't mean that INEOS can't make missteps, right?
Of course.
I do think that this whole review mumbo jumbo is a ton of crap, right? Like, it's just not the way that should have gone about it. And why do you think they're even doing this? Like, it just doesn't really make any sense, especially if they've decided on sacking the manager. Like, what is this whole charade?
I don't know. It's the same as if he was to stay. You know, the thing is, if they wanted him to stay, they could have said it already. It would have that's the default. He is presently the manager of Manchester United, right? They could say it today. They could say it tomorrow that he wants to stay. It would be that easy. They could have said it yesterday. They could have said it the night of the FA Cup. They could have said it on Sunday. They haven't said that either, right? So I don't know. But given that they haven't said anything yet, because there was no downside to saying he's staying if they want him to stay. They had loads of fan support at that point in time. Then you have to guess that they're looking at, all of the options. And, there was a good article by Melissa Reddy, who's the current Sky Sports person for United, that I think gave a good analysis of the whole situation, about the review where Ten Hag said it already happened, about the review this week, about talking to candidates during, about maybe it's just getting the succession plan properly in order so it doesn't go up like Bayern or Barcelona where you go back and forth and all of that. I would say presently, in terms of the last thing kind of on this, in terms of the targets, I would probably say I would guess that Pochettino and Frank, if there's a change made, I think Pochettino and Frank would probably be most likely. With Thomas Tuchel, there's the doubts that I've mentioned before, the concerns over certain aspects of the situation with him, that I said a few weeks back, that I said last week, that have been in some of the articles covering the situation about how he fits into their vision of things. So I can't say that for sure. That is not like an information. That's my analysis of the situation, that those two, Poch and Frank, just kind of based on looking at it all, would be probably the top two if a change is made. I can't see any information to suggest somebody else would be near the top of the list at the moment. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Like, I feel like we're one of the few people.
It's always been there.
It's so weird. It's so weird. Like, if you look at what Poch has been given everywhere he's gone, he's overachieved. I mean, there were multiple transfer windows at Tottenham that Poch was just not given any players, and continuously every single year got them Champions League football, played great football, attractive style of football with what he was given. He went to PSG, and that was a shit show. I don't even think I need to talk about that. I mean, no one's been able to succeed with PSG. And then he went to Chelsea, and he absolutely overachieved. Like, it's not just about trophies. He's been given bad players, mediocre players that don't work together, and then he's overachieved with them. Like, I am confident that if you put the man in a good system, like from a transfer perspective with good support, I think he would win things. I just think that he has not been given that so far. That's all I'm going to say in terms of Poch.
Yeah, obviously a lot of different opinions. It is what it is. I think he did a good job at Chelsea this year, given the insanity of the situation. To finish above us in the league, I think is pretty good. So we'll see. But there's aspects of, like, obviously the important things, and some of these are Mark and Ten Hag's favorite too. Playing and developing young players. I think both Ten Hag and Poch have a good record at that. So yeah, there's a lot of arguments to be made, but it's not us to make that kind of call eventually.
Oh, but I think to your point, I think you can't make those. I think the comparisons between Ten Hag and Poch are not really fair. Ten Hag, I think, has been backed. I think it's unfair to say he hasn't been backed. I think he's been given, ante for 100 million pounds. It's like a ridiculous backing. Casemiro, like we've backed Ten Hag. I do not, and while sure they've not been great signings, the problem is that they've been signings that he's wanted, right? So I don't think it's really fair to say that Ten Hag has been backed, not been backed similarly the way Poch has. Like, I don't think that's a fair comparison.
Yeah, it is funny though that it could be back between Ten Hag and Poch 2 years later. That is kind of funny. That is funny, whether it's true or not. That is funny. That was one of the worst Part of the problem with the whole manager thing, I think, started back then because it became like almost this public like contest. It was like, I swear, it was like American Idol, like who's going to be the last man standing to get the job in terms of how it was all presented 2 years ago. And it created so much tension between people about who they prefer and all that. And we're all used to the Glazers running things to where people feel like they have to have an extremely strong opinion and get into some camp over it. It's Manager FC is just the same thing as Player FC, is all of that. I don't particularly care for all of it. I support a lot of the players. I support a lot of the team. And if there's practically nobody that they could say, this person's leaving because it's for the good of the team and we're building something, that I would say that's wrong. It is what it is. At the end of the day, it's going to change. It's going to change dramatically with new ownership in there making these kinds of decisions. So, again, always feel free to have your view on it. Let's move on to transfers. Danny says, Ajax no title in 5 years, 4 in a row for Ten Hag, now bad. Yes, they also lost Overmars and Van der Sar and a lot of things.
They also lost. Ten Hag's Ajax also did lose
Lissandro Martinez. Yeah, well, that's true too. They also lost a lot of players when Ten Hag left 2 years ago.
Champions League.
Yeah. So let's move to transfers quick here, because it's been like 50 minutes. We do have to kind of get through.
We could literally do this all day.
Yeah, we could do this all day, and that is the truth about it. Is unfortunately, we could do this all day, all of us, and our opinions on it while we wait for something to happen. Javier Jimenez, Poch, and United is destiny. At times it's felt like that, but it's never happened. So I guess we'll see. Transfers. So main names, obviously, that we've talked about. Center backs, for sure. There's been some stories on Gerard Braithwaite. United kind of circling around it. But it's going to be all about, obviously, the fee. Everton, their financial situation being what it is, whether they'll come down to a reasonable zone. If they're not going to come down from 60, 70 million pounds, it's not one that United will get done. And so I think that's worth mentioning. But the strategy seems to be kind of continuing there, which is to circle it and keep the pressure on. They're not really talking to Everton at the moment, but they want to see, if they'll come down to a reasonable level, and I think it's a good target. Tosin, obviously somebody of a lot of interest to United, but this one where they would have to move. Newcastle's made their offer. Chelsea's kind of moving in on it now. And, that could definitely go if United don't make a move quickly. Danny, Spurs squad worth how much? Only last min winner. Okay, fair enough. I mean, they beat Madrid too, so I guess he's better than all the Madrid managers as well, but it doesn't really matter. Maki Mudo says, Riddy, what do you think about signing? Go ahead.
If we had 100 million, man, I'd do it. And I could pronounce his name too, but I'm not going to do it. But I could.
He got you there. He got you there.
How do you feel about PSG signing him for 100 million? I think is the better question.
Yeah.
What about the Nice center back?
Yeah, Todibo. I think Todibo is another option. And I still think that those three are the most realistic, right? I'm not saying all three, but of the options that are available, Todibo, Tosin, and Gerard Braithwaite are three players that I think would be potentially, the likely targets there. And so, that's who I think will be there. One of the things that is interesting is for a long time, you didn't see a lot of mentions in the midfield. I talked for most of this year about how Casemiro is very likely to leave. You look at the situation come the end of the season, and you have maybe some kind of reports going round and round on it, but he was clearly not happy at the end of the year. Clearly a bit, nose put out of joint about what has happened and how things have gone. There's offers from Saudi, that are exploring and looking for him. And of course, a defensive midfielder's always been a priority. It's taken a long time for it to start getting mentioned because for a long time they kept saying striker and center backs, and there was no mention in the midfield. It's been something they've been looking at for 2 years. I mean, last summer they were looking at we may need to replace Casemiro in the future, and they made offers, for loan to buys on people like Fofana, Palacios, all of that. That is a position. What's that?
Amrabat was. We got Amrabat.
Yeah,
Amrabat
obviously we needed
the,
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, what would you keep Amrabat? No. Okay.
Maybe if we saw more of him, then we'd be able to get a better measure. And if he was used,
got a position for like.
Well, I know, but we can't pay 25 million based on what we saw.
For 3 games.
Yeah,
he's playing a position for 3 games, and he looked pretty good. Like, it's tough when you have Casemiro playing center back, and everyone's like, obviously, I think we should sell Casemiro. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But when you have him, Amrabat specifically playing left back for like most of the season, and then he plays. I mean, he just, it's not fair, and I don't think he's shown how good he actually is. And I didn't think we did see it in the last couple of games, but I don't know if it's enough to keep him.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's a risk. It's just a risk, and it's too much of a risk to spend that kind of money. I wish we gotten to see more of him, but there were certainly times we've seen him be pretty bad. I would say that he looked good against City, but we were also 26% possession, 30% possession. Settled in a bit deeper where you're not having to get up and down so much and all of that. But maybe he would be a good backup. But personally, I'd certainly focus more on spending all the money possible on a really good starter to put in that midfield with Bruno and Kobbie Mainoo, obviously. That would be definitely the key. And then, up front, there's obviously a striker, but from as far as I understand, Šeško is not likely to happen. That's one that we've talked about before. That is not likely. That is very much not likely to happen, partially just because his release clause ended up being so expensive. But then you have links to Ivan Toney and all of that. The issue is, how do they all fit? How do they all fit into there when you have a guy like Rasmus Højlund, who I think had a good year and could be great? It makes more sense to get in, somebody affordable on a deal. I can't even think of great names, to be honest, but that's obviously up to them to figure that out. I think it makes a lot more sense to do that. What do you think, Riddy, there in terms of get another young striker to compete or get a Cavani here?
Me personally, I love Højlund. I have tons of faith in Højlund. I know that's, with some of the people on the Discord, that's not a super popular opinion. I think he's going to be a real great player for us. I think he's shown a lot of potential. I think he has, wireless movement in the boxes, whatever. I think he's very athletic. I think he's strong build, fast as hell. I mean, that run at the end of that FA Cup to win that ball was inspiring. I think he's a great player, and I think that he will become our striker. And so I think I would much rather get a more experienced striker to balance off of him, but also maybe somebody that is the other style of striker. I maybe someone who's more of a poacher in the box and someone who's a little bit better hold-up play. I know that's definitely a part of Højlund's game that I think people do not think very highly of. I'd probably get an experienced striker. I think we really need to. We can't just this is the same thing that happened with Martial and Lukaku, and then whatever. We buy a striker that's going to be good, then we just buy the next big thing, and we never develop that striker. We waste all that money. I think Højlund's going to be good.
Yeah, I would agree there. And Danny says Fofana, Todibo for price of Braithwaite, got to spend smart. I don't disagree with that. I think Fofana and Todibo would be 2 great moves. Yeah. Unless Braithwaite comes down to a realistic fee. Yeah, and so obviously then continuing with the talk up front, I do think the money would be better spent on Michael Olise, who obviously we have a lot of interest in, simply because one of the problems is, the problems with the dynamic of Rashford, Garnacho, and Højlund together is they're all 3 kind of best at doing the same thing, getting on the run forward. So it works when we're trying to...
Don't forget Ahmad.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, Ahmad has a good profile. I'd like to have 2 of his profile, which I think Olise makes a lot of sense. If Anthony was any good, he would fit that. Where you have that kind of more creative possession-based winger on one side, Ahmad and Olise, and you have Garnacho and Rashford on the other side, but they can also flip. That's the nice part. So
I think if you look at I think Garnacho has been better on the right. Why are you, what? Are you laughing at that? You laughing at the super chat?
Yeah. Go ahead. Finish what you're
You're
saying.
laughing at my I think Ahmad's going to stay. I think Sancho will stay in the Bundesliga. I don't think he's coming back to United. I think we will probably sell him. I'm not super happy about that, obviously. But I think that if you have, I think that Ahmad is, he's a great dribbler. I think he'd be kind of a better kind of in a Bruno role. I think he has a lot of potential there. But yeah, I think maybe, and does Elise play on the left?
Not really. I mean, he floats around a lot, but mostly on the right.
Garnacho, Rashford on the left, Ahmad, Elise on the right. And then, look, have you heard anything about kid's name? The French kid.
Desiree Dewey, I think is how you're pronouncing it. Is that what people are asking for? That's as good as I'm going to get.
The French would murder you.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything, but I'm not saying it's not realistic because I think there's decent people reporting it, but I haven't heard anything.
Wasn't there like one report? There was like one report from Academy Scoop, and I haven't seen anything otherwise.
Fabrizio might have said something at Doué. Yeah, sure, Desiree Doué. So look, the thing is that I think it's clear that we need options because Mason Greenwood is very likely to be sold and not return to United, which I think most people would agree with. Jadon Sancho is most likely to leave, which I think is probably best for all parties. And so
I'm not happy about that. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Sancho, but I think that the relationship is probably busted, and it's just not. I think he's kind of similar to Ahmad in a lot of ways, and Ahmad is happy, and he's not. Just move him on, get good money that can work towards FFP, and everyone's happy.
Yeah, exactly. So then you need options because part of the problem is we've got essentially 3 players who have consistently contributed in their careers at United now, which is Garnacho obviously coming up, Rasmus Højlund, who's had a good first season, and Marcus Rashford. That's only 3. I think Ahmad is a really good talent, but he can't be your only option, right? Like you can't just have that's your 4th option as someone who's played 3 games in the Premier League, started 2 maybe. That's not a lot. And so I think
could have been starting for like half the season post injury.
Right, but he hasn't, right? So we don't know consistency, what he's going to do. But you want 5 or 6 really good forwards. If you look at City, I mean, Jack Grealish didn't even come on against United. Maybe he should have, but he didn't even come on. They were able to sub on Jeremy Doku, and they have options. They've always had a lot of options. They've got Alvarez and Holland. They've got so many, and we need the same to have 5 or 6 strong options there. So I think that's what they're going to aim for. But I don't think they can spend big money at striker because it's positionally, it's just too difficult. I would suspect they don't spend too much there.
I think we also have some like good strikers coming up from the academy. Didn't we just sign one to a senior contract?
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah, you have guys like Wheatley who's been scoring goals and doing well and got his senior debut, but they're not ready. But that's also another thing why you don't sign another young project on top of them.
No, exactly.
There's no space for them to come through.
Yeah, I'm agreeing.
Yeah.
There's no way we should be signing a young striker.
Yeah.
Keep it older and more experienced, and then bring up Højlund and bring up the academy kids that are good enough. Like, what about left back?
Yeah, left back.
That's a tough.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we need something there. The question is Amos going to be ready by next season? Is he good enough? We don't know, but he is really, really highly rated. He is really highly rated. They really like him. He might get some time in the preseason, but otherwise, there's
just like Mike. Could be a very similar situation to how Mainu has.
Yeah.
Come up.
The problem though is either way there. You can't say Luke Shaw or Tyrell Malaysia will be healthy next year. You kind of almost think of it like you have 0 because neither of them have been healthy. I mean,
I think we'd sell Luke Shaw.
Probably not, but it's not unreasonable to say you want a starting left back like, Aitnuri or Kirkus or something like that, and then Shaw to back him up, and then Amos as a youth player to come in kind of and maybe get some minutes. That's not unreasonable to think that you might need that in order to make sure you don't lose out on having a left back next year at all and end up with Amrabat or Lindelof or something like that, to be your left back in for another season, because that's crazy. That can't happen again. that is the thing that can't happen again, you know. So
we also sent off
yeah, Regulon, I know.
Regulon.
And then it all went to shit again with both Malaysia and Shaw. So, you know, that kind of sucks. So, but we can't have that happen again. But I would say, you know, those names we've discussed are all the most realistic thing. Now there might be, that's not a lot of senior signings when you kind of look at it in terms of money, but you know, kind of moving on to the spending thing, which has been a topic this morning. Part of it is we don't really know that they can spend altogether that much. I know that there's certain analysis of the budget that would lead you to believe we can spend an enormous amount of money, but some of that's based on assumptions that we don't know. The problem with United is that they've lost a lot of money. In 21-22, they lost money last year, and we don't know what their financials are going to be this year. And the leaving of people like Varane and Martial frees up wages, a significant amount of wages that's going to allow to replace them. I think that with Varane and Martial leaving, you could spend 75 to 100 million just to buy players without sales. But everything after that is going to require a boost to profitability. Again, no Champions League, highest ever transfer payables at United. 400 million plus spent in the last 2 summers, and you've got to figure out what to do with Anthony, 86, Casemiro for 60. You know, Amrabat spent 10 and he goes. Eriksen was not a transfer fee, but he's probably going to go. There's a lot of money spent, and then you still have the question marks on Mason Mount, who has barely even played.
Well, you think Lindelof's staying, right? We signed him to an extension.
No, he's got a 1 year. They just triggered the option. Him or Maguire, one of them's going to stay. And Maguire's a more saleable asset, which is why you might think Lindelof would stay. But
I want him to go, dude.
I would probably flip that. But yeah, the financial situation isn't such that they can just blow 200 million again. It's just not. You have cash to spend. I don't think cash is an issue. I think that the spending can be good. I think the point on the spending is that with the right sales, they could have a really good summer, a big summer, because you have assets like Mason Greenwood that are huge profit boosts if you sell them. You have assets like Scott McTominay that are big profit boosts if you sell them. And you have big wages like Martial and Varane that have come off, but if you sell Casemiro, not only could you hopefully recoup and break even on the fees, but a huge amount of wages coming off, like 2 to 3 younger players worth of wages coming off. And so, you know, that's going to be one of the main things too, is depending on how much they can, you know, if they can keep wages down to a minimum and sign players who have not huge wage demands, not sign stars for 300,000 a week, then the departures of these big players means you could spend a lot more. So it's flexible. It wouldn't be fair to say they have 200 million. It wouldn't be fair to put a specific number on it because it's really based on who gets sold in terms of how it affects profitability, as well as wages, and as well as who they bring in and what are their wages. Because wages are a huge factor. Wages are bigger than the transfer fees in a lot of ways. When you look at it, the transfer fee gets amortized. A lot of times the wages are bigger than the transfer fees when we've been doing things. So, you know, it's 50-50 there. But I think we can sign a center back and a forward without sales. Beyond that, we need Casemiro going is a huge part of what we can spend in the midfield. And then, you know, departures in the left back and things like that would be a big deal. So that would be my kind of overview of it and what I'd expect, that they can move on a couple of deals, but it also was why it makes sense to get someone like Tosin. If you could get Tosin and Braithwaite or Tosin and Todibo, you get 2 center backs in for a good fee, you can rebuild things a lot. So yeah, that's where we are. I think that about covers everything we wanted to talk about today. We'll open it for a couple more minutes for questions and things like that as we wrap things up. Yeah.
Is there a risk you lose your sources?
Not really. I'm not concerned about those types of things.
Will the ends be quick before United get the PL season going. Yeah, I think that the new structure will be doing it a little bit differently. I think if they've just shown with how this Ashworth negotiation has gone, I think they're sick of United being pulled, their chain pulled and being forced to spend $100 million on a one-footed right wing. I think it'll be I think you'll see difference, and I think you'll see that is because obviously the people in charge now are people that have worked in the football industry for years. They're not like, it's not a banker. So yeah, I think it'll be different.
Yeah.
Do you think there could be an unknown candidate for the manager job?
Sorry, what was that? I was just reading something.
Do you think there could be an unknown candidate for the manager job?
I think that they've probably talked to everybody they're going to speak with. I mean, there's always those little names like Ruben Amorim that we've talked about before, but there's issues with it. Again, though, I mean, could INEOS surprise us all? Yeah, that's just a guess, like the Omar Barada thing. But overall, I think that the issue with managers is when you talk to them, you get agents, and so people are aware. It's a little different to talking to staff.
Yeah, it's tough to keep that under wraps.
Yeah, as you said, someone says, focus on youth and brain fate. Yeah. I think that aligns with everything we've been talking about.
Who's in charge of recruitment? Will Cox and Will be Ashworth when that's resolved, but those guys, and then obviously the recruitment department and the scouts and all those departments.
Yeah. The women's team contract renewals. Honestly, I don't know, and that is a concern. One of the things I did want to mention, that reminds me of something. One of the problems that INEOS and United will have this year, because there were stories about Joel Glazer being involved, right, in the end of season review. And the thing that has to be realized is, one, he kind of has to be. He's the majority owner of the club, and even if he doesn't have the control over his sporting matters, he still has a legal obligation to have oversight into major decisions that are happening. Because it's a publicly traded company and he's the representatives of the major shareholders. He would not be doing his due diligence if he was not involved in these discussions. Secondly, there's still a little bit of an uncomfortable situation as you look at it with the finances at United, because the budgets are still set by the board. And they would all agree, have the budgets, and then INEOS in control of sport would be able to go use the money as they see fit. That's how it'll be probably next season. But the budget for this year has likely already been set, right? Because they came in mid-year. So if you need money to, let's say they need money to replace the manager, 6-7 million plus pay for somebody else, you're going to need Joel Glazer's sign off on that, on the funds for that. If you're going to give Ten Hag a new contract, you're going to need sign off for that. So the women's team question reminded me of that, because I think that's one of those same issues, is that the finances and what's available right now are not totally clear. And you can see by all these cuts happening, they're also trying to reduce dramatically the amount of expense that happens during this fiscal year that ends June 30th for football clubs, because of this whole PSR thing. If they can make this year have a really good one, then after July 1st, it can help the amount that they can spend later on because of that 3-year rolling kind of put together number. But
INEOS is still making the footballing decisions.
Of course, he can't. But at the same time, what we don't know is if they need 15 million to do something, they kind of have to ask for it right now, because the budget isn't set. Maybe we don't know the details or ins and outs of that. That won't.
I know we don't know the details, but from these are very successful businessmen, and I feel like that there is. There's something in that contract that there's no way like INEOS would make this deal and Sergio Marcos would make this deal unless there was some form of quick.
I'm not worried about it, but he is going to be involved in this at the moment.
No, he has to be involved somewhat, but I don't think you should be concerned about it. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think it's going to be a concern.
Somebody asked about the money that Jim Ratcliffe put in, and part of it is these are the types of things that are used for like the operating expenses and all that. But one of the thing is this the renovation of Carrington. This is a project that started already. People have been asked to leave and not come back until they've got through a certain point. That's going to take a lot of money, the renovation of Carrington, all of that. The money that was invested is supposed to be used for infrastructure. That's what it's intended for. It can be used for other things, but it's supposed to be used for infrastructure. And the first thing that happens is they're going to do a whole renovation of Carrington to get it up to standards, and then eventually they're going to tear it down, or rebuild somewhere else and move there, and then tear it down, or some sequence of things. So either way, that's one of the things where the money is being spent.
You want to talk about any progress on Ashford United?
I've heard maybe there's a little bit, because arbitration was supposed to be in May. It hasn't started yet, as far as we all know, anyway. Sometimes the threat of arbitration is a bit of the negotiating tactic itself. So I've heard there might be some movement, but that's a horrifically vague answer because I just don't know. It's just sometimes it's just little hints like that, and then things start to pick up. But that movement could be that it's going to arbitration now, and we couldn't reach anything. That movement could be we've decided to delay arbitration because we're having more talks. It could be practically anything. I don't know, unfortunately, so I can't give a great answer.
The thing with threatening a suit is that at the end of the day, it's always better to settle, especially with a suit on the line, because you can hire the best lawyers in the world, and you don't actually know what the result is going to be, right? You could absolutely come out with nothing. It's always better to settle. So this threat of arbitration really puts Newcastle in a bind, because at the end of the day, arbitration could happen and they could just be screwed. They could be forced to accept $2 million, none. So it's always better, and now, especially for Newcastle, for them to settle in this situation. Do you guys have any idea when we should expect club statements about the manager situation?
I mean, a lot of people have said now, like next week, like maybe that's correct. I certainly think it's unlikely to be based on all of that anytime soon. But again, I've heard nothing new. That's not an update. I've heard nothing new. That's not new information, that there's no information. It's that I've heard nothing new that would suggest, something is imminent or anything like that. And to be clear as well, when people start saying something isn't imminent, that doesn't mean it's tomorrow. That means it's probably at least a few days to a week out. And so it sounds more likely that we're talking about, earliest end of the week, maybe Friday, or maybe early next week for things to be stated.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
There's a question, how can they spend $50 million this fiscal year on Braithwaite to squeeze Everton with what you just said? Well, they wouldn't spend $50 million this year. They would spend $10 million this year, because it would be amortized over a 5-year contract. But again, it's the thing is that that's one of those things that has to be factored in. If they're thinking we need to spend some money this year, that is going to take away from what they can spend elsewhere. It's not like there's no money. It's just all the things you might have to spend on have to be balanced together.
Do you have an opinion on why it's taking so long? Yeah, I mean, I have an opinion, which is that most likely they wouldn't announce a departure without having an immediate appointment, right? So, they're most likely finalizing if they are sacking him, which I feel like they're most likely finalizing a replacement, right? They're not going to sack the manager, have no plans, and then go into transfer window with nobody. So most likely they're finalizing the next deal, the next manager, if they are sacking him. Hence why it's probably taking so long. That's a longer process. So that's probably why. I mean, it's we had heard he was going on vacation. Ten Hag was going on vacation. He's going on vacation. That could be he's coming back to his office cleared out. Most likely. I mean, it's a whole process.
Yeah.
I think he's coming. I think he's coming back to his office cleared out personally.
Fair enough. Shenanigans says INEOS cost cutting everywhere might be silent, making it difficult for Ten Hag, hoping he walks without compensation. I don't think so. I don't think it really works that way. I don't think it can, especially as there's not really another job lined up for him. So I don't think that is the case. But yeah,
I don't think he's gonna struggle to find a job.
Yeah,
he'll be fine.
I think he'd get one, maybe somewhere else in Germany or something like that if he did go. But
maybe I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, maybe in Germany.
Yeah,
I don't think Ahmad's on the sell list. I don't. That's me coping. I personally don't think he's on the sell list. But I think, as they said, there's a focus on youth, and Ahmad is very quickly one of our young up and coming players. So I don't think we would sell him.
Question: if they talk to Poch for Nice, do you think they already talked about this model? Yeah, that's a good point too, and I think that's been brought up. Jean-Claude Blanc was also the deputy CEO at PSG when he was there, so I'm sure they know him, and so they know him. Beyond that, who knows, right? But they know him. King Rollo says, "Who do you both of you reckon will be the next manager?" Opinion, and if I just had to bet, I would say Pochettino, but it is literally a guess. Literally a guess at this point in time.
I would say Poch, Thomas Frank, not in terms of who I think are good. This is not I think they're good. This is who I think will be. I would say Poch is pretty likely if it's going to be anybody, and then probably Thomas Frank.
Yeah, if they make a change,
I
that's
think,
what I would expect.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm actually not going to talk about Thomas Frank at all because I know literally nothing. I'm not going to pretend like I've watched anything about him.
That makes sense.
I'm not going to play this game. I'm
Um,
just not going to do that.
But yeah,
De Zerbi signing. I mean, I don't think there's any chance of De Zerbi. I think he's going to. I think there's talks of him going to City next year.
maybe, yeah. Maybe.
Taking a year off. I don't know.
It seems like there's talk of him being on the list. I just haven't heard anything in any time recently that would indicate that.
You did. I mean, they were terrible towards the end, like the second half of that season.
Yeah. So I mean, again, guys, overall, like I said, we had all those questions. I've answered practically everything on the manager, but I said everything last week. I haven't heard anything else, so I don't have any news. There's maybe other people that would have news coming forward and all of that. Discussing it earlier is just pointing out some of the things that don't totally make sense. At the end of the day, nobody knows what is going on during this review in specific, and so we're all kind of waiting for it. I think, frankly, everybody's up to date as we are on what's happening, and quite everybody is in the same boat of waiting to see what the outcome is now, whether they... And to be clear, I think all of us think this needs to be resolved sooner rather than later, right? I mean, all of us are like, this is kind of crazy. This has to be like settled, like just settle it. If it goes beyond this week, it's weird. It's a weird situation. For one, because I've never seen a club interviewing a bunch of managers when they're not planning to let go of their current one, right? So you can draw your own conclusions from that. But then usually you kind of know that the manager's being let go by the time they're doing interviews. And then this season ends and you don't know. I mean, Chelsea wrapped it up quickly. Whether they got it right or wrong, they did wrap it up quickly. Bayern took a long time, but that's why they started the process during the year. Barcelona took a long time, but that's why they started the process during the year. And now they all know. There's nobody left. Liverpool got it done. There's no big club left right now looking for a manager. I think everybody's... I mean, even Nice, Farioli left and they replaced their manager in a week. So this can't take too much longer to kind of finalize this.
I feel like they have to. It just feels like they have to. Like, I feel like they know. Like, I feel like there's a decision's been made. You're right. INEOS was so so quick about Nice, right?
Yeah.
Done, boom, next. Like, obviously, it's a little bit more of
it's a bigger decision.
Delicate situation just because it's United. Like, maybe the review is them signaling, trying to tell the fans, like, hey, we looked at it, man. Like, we looked at it. We thought about keeping them. We're not going to do it. Maybe they are trying to play that angle of trying to appeal to the fans and show them that we thought about it. I think if they do sack Ten Hag, I think that there'll be a statement coming out that says it's mutual consent, obviously. And then reports will come out being like Ten Hag wanted more control than I think INEOS wanted in the manager, and so they amicably parted ways because the visions just weren't the same, like things like that. Sure. Right? I just think that's what's going to happen. I mean, we've talked about that a lot. I mean,
obviously we've practically talked it to death at this point in time in terms of all of it, and like we said, nobody knows at this point. But it is a fact that as of last week, he was very, very likely to leave. And from really good sources, really good journalists and things like that, that's what I'd listen to. I'm not even talking about myself because I haven't heard anything new. I would listen to the James Duckers and the Times, Ready, not Riddy, but Ready, and people like that Ornstein and the Athletic, and to see if there's anything that's going to change, and if so, I'm sure we'll find out. But at this point in time, I think everybody is in the dark and waiting. Okay, so that's what we've got. I think we should end it there. It's been an hour and 24 minutes. That was a good one. So, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all for asking questions. Thank you for everybody who's donated and been a part of it. Always welcoming to different opinions, different views, different everything, and just trying to keep everybody on the informed and as best as we all can on the same page. And I only thing I wish is that as a fan base in general, we didn't have to take so much, like, I don't know, that we didn't have to get in so many camps. I think that all of us would want the right people. The best way to get back to where we're going to be is to have the right people make the right decisions. I think that's what everybody should agree with. And then we can judge them based on how they do that and whether it works or not. That's the only way we can judge them. But, certainly I don't think that mine or any other fan's opinion is important enough that it's should have any effect on things. And that's where I would hope we can agree, that we can all have different opinions and we all should, but there's right people making those calls and we can judge them based on that.
I agree. I will also say that there is a group of people who are thriving embedding negativity to our fan base, which is, again, one of the reasons why we started the podcast, one of the reasons why we started the Muppetiers, the reason why the tagline was a positive take on all things united. Like, at the end of the day, I'm sorry, negativity does sell, and I did say this on Twitter. Negativity does sell, and it's a feedback loop, right? Because at the end of what happens is that the people that are tuning into these channels are not United fans. We lose a game, we lose 4-0, and you think I'm gonna tune in and watch some guy. No, it's gonna be Arsenal fans, it's gonna be City fans. Like, this negativity does breed. It makes money. It makes money for these people, and they are incentivized financially to keep doing that, right? And like already people are turning on INEOS. They haven't even done anything yet. It's been like 4 months. Like, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean? Like, so I think that you need to watch it. I think that it's something that is tough to sit by and just look at, because I think it you're right. It puts people into camps, and it makes impressionable young people have these negative ideas that it's going to stick with them. You see some guy that has, a million subscribers, and you think he knows what he's talking about, and you're like 16 years old, you're going to listen to the guy. It's breeding negativity, and it's leading to people fighting each other in ways that we just don't need to be doing that. It's just not good for the fan base. It's just not a good place to interact with each other. It's not fun. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. I hope that we can be less tribal and we can just have nice conversations about, transfer targets and not have to fight every 24 seconds. So yeah, that's all I got.
Cool. Good. All right. Well, then we're going to end it here. Thank you, everybody. And we will.
Know who I meant. I don't need to say.
What?
I said they know who I meant. I don't need to say his goddamn.
And that's Riddy's opinion too. So there you go. All right. We will see you all.